This is part two of my steampunk miner costume for a role I have in Antigone. Once again, I love my director. Nah, it's fine. It should work out very good. If you haven't seen part one yet, make sure you go watch it. It's mostly the helmet, but if you miss the helmet, then you're going to miss the whole thing. Alright, so I got the outer stripes on my shorts. We'll call them shorts. Right now they sit, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches below the knee when I'm standing, so they're really too long. But they're looking pretty good. The stripe, since the line, the seam is like right on the outside of my legs, it sits a little in the back, which is fine. And I managed to accidentally, but I like this, keep the old seam in there as an extra little bit of texture. So I'm kind of digging that. So what I'm going to do for the lower legs, I mentioned before, I cut the cuffs off and I just trimmed off both edges. Now they're a little bit too small to wrap around where I need to, right below my knee. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue this motif on, because I've got plenty of this fabric. And as opposed to what else I said, I am going to use some sort of fastener. So I'm going to add in 2 strips of the black on the gap here. And then I've got these no-sew dungaree buttons, because everything, this is it from Hancock Fabric before it shut down. Everything there was written by women from the 50s. But they're just like nail-on buttons for like jeans. And so what I figure I could do is, I'm going to just use a little strap here. Add this in on either side. One side will have a buttonhole, the other side will have the button. Because, you know, buttonhole. And that way I can slip on the shorts. Most of this extra length I'm keeping, because I might cut off an inch or two. But it's got to have, I want it to have lots of blousing. And that way when I sit down, and part of the thing I'm doing is I'm sitting on an acting block, which means my knees are going to be more acute angle than even 45. And so that means your leg kind of bunches up and gets a little bit bigger, and your pants will ride up more because you got more knees showing essentially. And I want to avoid the knee. So I'm going to keep all of this for blousing. So when I'm standing up, it'll look nice and bloomy and pirate shorts, as my daughter said. And when I'm sitting down, it kind of tightens up and it still covers up my knee. And I still have the cuff right below the knee where I want it. Most costumes, quite frankly, are just barely hung together. This includes movies, plays, cosplay. It'll always look good from afar. Sometimes it'll look good from a distance, but it's not designed for wear and tear of normal clothes. It's not the same thing as normal clothes. It can be essentially taped or glued on, last as long as you need it to, retape, reglue if you needed to, and go. This one will be a little more permanent, but it doesn't have to be a daily wear, so it's not that big of a deal if I cut some corners here and there. But let me get the waistband done and prep the cuffs here. And these will just be the cuffs. I'll pin them up in the right spot, sew them around, fold them over, we're done. The same kind of stitches I have been doing, which is a straight seam where I want it, and then zigzag over the edges to stop the fraying. So that'll be our next step, and then we can move on to the hard stuff. Alright, so I finally got my breeches done. It was a little of a challenge. These cuffs are a lot like a waistband, so if you know how to do a waistband, do it that way. I didn't realize that until I was already in the process, so I had to do a lot of kind of moving things around and faking it. Also, every time I make a buttonhole, I use my machine and I make it way too small. So I didn't use those buttons after all. I just found a couple of sew-on ones I could use. I have not tried on the pants, shorts, breeches, whatever, since I finished them. I tried them all once I did the first leg and it fit fine. It's exactly like I said. The cuff is not super tight, so it'll ride up above my calf. The pants will kind of ride a little bit low when I'm standing, but when I sit down, there's plenty of fabric so that my knees are covered and my cuff stays below my knee and above my calf while I sit down. So it's the perfect size. And so, yeah, I used a little bit of that stripe fabric so it just kind of fits in. And you can see I've got some bare parts there, which I wouldn't necessarily want it in there if I was doing this from scratch. But for this, I think it works very well. So that's part 2 of the costume done. let's throw it over here. The other stuff I have on this table is the next big part I'm working on. And that is the coat part. So I've got this interesting teal colored coat that has a lining I'm going to remove. It's actually a woman's coat that's somewhat small for me, but I was able to get over my shoulders. And since my plan is to cut off the sleeves, I can kind of increase the size of the armpits if I need to. And once I remove the lining, it'll be fine. I'm not actually planning on wearing anything underneath it except for like a white undershirt, because I believe I mentioned this before. I got these pants to act as sleeves. So basically, I'm going to cut them off below the crotch, or so. Just have enough so I can sew the sleeves into the sleeves I cut out here, the holes I cut out here, and just have it go down. It doesn't have to be all the way down here. It just needs to be mid forearm or so. I'll probably try to make it wrist, but I'm going to leave it open for the most part because I plan on making braces for both arms. And so I'll just tuck the ends into there. That way I can have like the blousing up here like I want, kind of poofy sleeves, but tight at the wrist because of bracing. Now, because this coat doesn't fit me, and I didn't think I would find one that would, when you're shopping at Goodwill and you're a bigger person like I am, you don't really find all the clothes you want. I don't know if it's because, I live in the Midwest. We grow them big out here. I always feel like it's because bigger people, especially dudes, wear their clothes to death. I know I do. I donate some clothes, but not that much because we just wear them out. Maybe it's just because I'm cheap. I don't know. Whatever. The point is that this is not going to wrap all the way around me. That's fine. That was part of my design. So I only wanted to come to about here, and then I'm going to have a front panel with a bunch of buttons up the side. That's what these are, a bunch of metal buttons. So I'm going to have like 2 columns of buttons. And for that front panel, I grabbed this shirt. I was just checking. Does this shirt fit me? It does not. But that's okay. So what I'm going to do is actually cut the back of this, use it as a front panel for the coat, and do the, what I'll do, I haven't decided on the connectors. So I want one side connected, and the other side I don't want to actually use the buttons for proper connection, so I'm just going to make those decorative. So I'm thinking of maybe a series of snaps or Velcro even, just down one side of it. That way I can put the coat on as normal, close it up on the one side, and I'm done. I don't have any, all of the details figured out as far as the collar. The collar is nice and floppy, but it's small for what I prefer. I kind of prefer like a bigger one, but I doubt if I'm going to worry about increasing it. And just other design details like that I haven't decided because, it's just going to happen as it happens. This belt I won't be using. So in addition to the buttons, I also have this, which is from curtains to hold curtains back or drapes. And quite frankly, I saw this and I was like, oh, that'd be pretty cool as a shoulder cord, kind of military in appearance. And so once I'm done attaching the sleeves and everything, this will be some of the decorations I just attached to the side. Okay, so I started prepping this coat. As I said, I was going to cut the sleeves off. When I put it on, I realized there was, like I said before, there's a weird angle here, so I just kind of cleaned it up so it looked a little bit better. And I've got the legs of those white pants cut off, and I wanted to show you the shape here. This feels like Velcro on this scratched up table. Just from making lots of sleeves in my past, I know that they all have the same kind of shape here. So there's kind of a swooping S-curve going down. And I just kind of eyeballed it. It doesn't really matter because it is so very big. But the top of the sleeve is there, and the bottom is here where the armpit is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it. You can see this coat has a lining. I'm going to leave that lining. I'm not going to sew off the edges or anything. I'm going to leave it inside and actually pin and sew the sleeves just the inside here. There is a seam that goes all the way around with the interface and everything, and I may use that. It's as good a spot of any to kind of just tack onto. I can't get it all the way through here, so I wouldn't be able to go all the way around. but it would mean that I wouldn't actually see any threads on the outside. So I may go with that just because I think it'd be a little bit of a cleaner option. And as always, if it ends up not working, then I won't go that way. You'll just see threads on the outside. I don't care that much. In fact, looking at it, it may be hard to do that because this has already been snipped to allow for the easing so that it fits around a curve of the body. So I might just go shove the sleeve in there and just curve and pin, or pin and curve around with some sort of contrasting thread. I probably have thread somewhat this color, but if I'm going to do this anyway, I'm also make some contrasting thread that kind of stands out, makes it look a little bit better. I've also been playing what I'm doing with the shirt portion. Now, originally I had said I was going to do a flat panel with buttons down the sides. I think what I might do now is actually take the shirt, which, as I said before, doesn't fit me, so I can't just wear it as a shirt underneath it. But if I take it, cut it down the side, so I just essentially separate the front from the rest of the shirt, cut off the sleeves, and then kind of sew it into this inner flap where the lining was buttoned into. I can actually make it look like I've got a layered look here with even some flap going on, and then use the center part to actually connect the whole coat and keep it on. Now I'd still want to use all these buttons to do a line of buttons down the middle here. So I'd probably replace all of these buttons with actually just a couple of strips of Velcro. And then for the collar, I'm going to cut it down the back. It doesn't fit my neck. Cut the big flaps on and just have a flat roll collar, I think. And that way, the way I've been wearing the coat is actually have the collar up and kind of down. I want to say it's very Blade Runner. I think that's how Harrison Ford was wearing in that movie. Just have the back kind of scooped up and down. It goes way back. It wasn't like that movie invented that. It was going back to the noir films of the olden days. So that's my plan right now. I'm going to throw in some sleeves, get that kind of squared away, and I think I'm going to start cutting up that shirt and putting it in there too, because this is a big part of this costume, and I'm almost done with it, except for all the hard work in front of me. So I'm looking forward to getting to that point of it. Here we are. Not quite done yet. Look. What I did with my shirt, this thing is totally cut up. I want to give you an update on what I was doing here. So I cut the front part off the shirt. I removed all the buttons. The collar, it was a standard collar. What I did is I took a seam ripper and I took out this top seam after I cut it in half because it's a little bit easier that way. Removed all that part. Got a little bit of spare fabric from the back of the shirt. Kind of like measured it across my neck. Put it in there. You can see there's this little cross piece here, which was a fold because I made it too big. But that's fine. You can also put in some elastic if you think your neck's going to get bigger or smaller. I didn't worry about that. I just figured for that it's good. So like I said before, I got left the top button. I'm going to put Velcro in the to actual closure, and I'm going to sew the open bits into the flaps on this coat. On the coat, you can see I've got both sleeves done. I sewed one of them inside out, had to undo it. I did go with standard sleeve connections. They don't have the overlapping because it's a very big, bulky coat, and I had to kind of spin it around my machine as I was sewing it in order to do that, because when you overlap this, you have long parts of this side and long parts of this side, as opposed to when you make a standard seam, you got a short part you can easily get through. So I went with a standard one just because it was proven to be too much of a pain. I've got my lanyard here. It's not really the aiguillette. I looked up a lot of information on these uniform bits. A proper aiguillette has a little metal tip on it. Yes, related to aglets of our shoelaces. Interesting fact. It's a history lesson and everything. So anyway, the next part is I put the shirt on, kind of go in my mirror, kind of adjust where it's standing, and quite frankly, just try to pin it in a couple places to this thing. That way I can unbutton the top, finish it up. What I'll do is I'll pin up the inside. I'll pin the front closed, so I have an idea of, I'll have to do that while I'm wearing it, of course. So I'll make sure that there's enough room and it fits right. Now, I have been thinking about this, and I need to point out, if you're going to make a costume similar to this, You can go buy a brand new shirt that fits fine. That's a perfectly good way of doing it. I was trying to do this cheap, and I was trying to do it through thrift store shopping only, and not destroy my own, shirt. I almost destroyed my own pair of pants because those pants didn't fit, but then I had the idea for the stripe, and it worked out perfectly fine. So if you have old clothes even you might be getting rid of where, there's some problems here or there, you can use for costumes. That's a great source. I'll try to do a running tally at the end when we're closer to the end of this. I didn't spend much on this though, and that was kind of one of the points. If I had found a shirt that fit that I liked, I would have been perfectly fine throwing that on, having the jacket open as it is now, and it had been a lot more smooth, a lot easier for me. Oh, another thing, speaking of things more difficult for me. So the front of this shirt is, I remained long, I kept the shirt tails there, and I wear my pants and my shorts below my gut, so not at my true waistline, which is across the belly button, but below where essentially the seam of the belly is. It's important to bring up now because I don't want this shirt just kind of flopping out. So there is enough fabric so that once I have it sewn in here, I can actually tuck the front into the breeches I made. It'll look a little silly from the side, but when I'm sitting down even like this, because the coat will be pinched in because it's sewn to the shirt I'm on, that won't show at all. It'll just look like I'm wearing a shirt underneath a jacket. It's not the case, but that's what it'll look like. So that being in mind, at a certain point, I'm going to not sew the bottom of this. So I'm going to sew like up the edges here into the coat, but the bottom part will be loose. That way I can tuck it in. And I'll stop the buttons, the decorative buttons, probably at the last buttonhole that's already on the shirt. So that's my plans for now. They've already changed since last we spoke. They'll probably change again. But this is our check-in. Let's get the rest of this done. All right. Finally got the coat done. That was some unpleasantries. I'm not going to lie. As you can see, I've got all my buttons here. Once I realized that these weren't going to be useful buttons, like I wasn't going to button them, I realized I only needed one stitch a piece. And I also realized I could daisy chain them together. So there's only like 2 strips each with just little strings you can't possibly see. Little strings cut in between them. I got my Velcro sewn on. I actually used a matching thread to kind of hide it a little bit. The bottom one, it sticks out a little bit. It's no big deal. And the only problem I really have is that it's a little bunched up at the top, but as long as I pull my neck a little bit higher, it kind of smooths out and it's fine. So once again, maybe find an actual shirt to mess with. What is it? With chips. So aside from that, I've got my little canary in a cage with a little band on it I can hook onto one of these buttons. And a nice respirator mask I thought looked very, miney. Which can clip into the buttonhole here. So I'll wear my collar up like that, and we'll be good to go. So that's the major part done. Finally, that took a long, long time. Not only actually doing stuff, but just kind of figuring things out. So, move this on to the finished pile. Whee! Careful. You don't want to throw your little props. Isn't this awesome? I just found this at the craft store. Complete. A little canary in a cage already. How perfect is that for a minor? E-R, not O-R. Not young person. Someone who minds. Next. Next. Well, next is this bad boy. My wife's old briefcase. Nice fake alligator. It's been out here in the cold, so it's completely not pliable. I had to go put it inside so I can actually use it. And this I'm going to be cutting up for my bracers. Now there's a couple of things I was thinking of for those. One of which was to actually use these buckles. I mean, there's only 3 of them. So maybe use 2 of them on one of the bracers. And then I realized today that I've got a whole bunch of eyelets and some thin elastic cord like I used here for the cage just to clip it on. So what I'm thinking is I'll make one of them so that the elastic cord is going to be on the outside like lacing, and that way I can just kind of slip it on and off. And then the other one I might do that way, or I might use the buckles. These are fake buckles, like they just magnetic snaps. So I should be able to do something like that. Depending on how easy, because this material is like fairly thick, hard plastic. Depending on how easy it is to add the eyelets to, I might do both that same way. That way they kind of match. Otherwise, I won't. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me if they match that much. I just need something that like kind of adds a cuff. I'm not going to go all the way up to here. I'll probably do about mid-arm, maybe a little bit higher up. Something to slip on to hold to capture the sleeve ends and just kind of bring the top part together. I've got a lot of colors going on. I'm going to keep adding a lot of colors. This is very much not a monochrome costume. It's got a lot of colors, got a lot of different elements. The buttons on the coat, you can see, they were all metal buttons, but they're all kind of random from a big pile I just found. I bought 60, I used 30. Well, I bought 60 because I was doing 2 strips, and ended up with 1 because it just fit the design better. After this, I've got my leggings to do, and that is done. This has been, I'm trying to think now, at this point I think a 4-day project. This is a Monday night. I had today off, but I had to run a bunch of errands, so I didn't get a lot of work done, some of it. And the weekend, a lot of things have been going on. So if you're going to do a project like this, set aside at least a week. If you work full-time or more, set aside longer. Because I've barely done this during the working week. It's mostly been during the weekend, some at night. So yeah, it's a long project. I'm almost done though. I want to get it done in 2 days. That's my next rehearsal. I want to show it off. So that's my goal. We'll see if we get there. Okay, for the sizing of these bracers, I've got one of the pant legs that I cut off. I'm just going to throw it over on, I'm wearing my jacket, but it's going to take in quite a bit of the fabric from the, it's going to take in quite a bit of the fabric from the pants that I used as sleeves. So I've got a couple safety pins and some tailor's chalk. I don't know where you buy this new. I bought it at that craft store a few months ago, so it's fairly cheap. I don't think it probably costs that much. This is an invaluable tool. I have a couple of crayons sort of my sewing kit, but a little bit of chalk really goes a long way. So I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to use it as a pattern for cutting that bag up in order to make the bracers. And because, at least in the first one, I'm going to use the rivets, I'm not going to worry about a seam allowance at all. I'm just going to cut the bag to that same dimensions. I'll probably clean it up. Like, this is way too long, obviously. And not quite at the right angle because it's just a kind of a flat line. You can't really see the chalk marks. But it's got a flat line here and then an angled line down here. So I probably want to kink it back a little bit just so it's kind of like the same angle. Like these 2 parallel lines right here as opposed to these 2 parallel lines. The conic section. So I want to make my conic section parallel to the base, not just random to a couple of the slices, in math terms, which I barely, what's that, 10th grade geometry? I don't know, something like that. So I'm going to cut my pattern out of this. I'm going to use it for my pattern of my bracer from the fabric of the bag. I say fabric, that stuff is pretty much just plastic. And then I'm going to put in a heck of a lot of grommets in there and lace it up and see what we got. And if I like it, and I'm thinking, I'm honestly thinking I'll probably just do it for both because it'll be a lot easier. But if not, I'll go with the buckles for the other side too, just kind of mix it up. That's the kind of fun part about this costume. I don't know what I'm doing. I've got some general plans, but as I've said many times before, we'll see. For you, it's been blink of an eye. For me, it's been a few days. A lot of stuff's been going on. So I've got my bracers cut out. The bag produced a nice couple of pieces. I decided I'm just going to lace them both up. The buckles were just too much of a pain. Didn't want to worry about it. These will cover a pretty good section of the arm and should keep those sleeves tucked in nicely. Now I've already got one punched out with one of these little grommets put in place. You can get these fairly cheap at the craft store, or actually my local hardware store has them too. And like, there's large grommets and these little itty bitty ones near the rivets. So what I was going to do, what I have, mine's from the craft store from years ago. I've got some of these like gold ones, I've got some silver ones. I'm going to randomize them because that just works in my costume. You get this little itty bitty metal piece. You put the grommet thing through the back. You put it here, a couple taps of the hammer, it spreads out, boom, it's locked in. I've had these for years because of a different costume I made many years ago. So I was laughing about this plastic. So it is definitely like some, wishes it was brand name Naugahyde top. And it's backed with this EVA foam. Remember this from that big bag to give it some depth. I'm leaving the foam on because it stiffens it up and it treats it more like the kind of thick leather you would have there to protect your arms. So that's why I did that. If you're doing something similar to this and you found the same type of thing, you want a more supple fake leather, then yeah, take off the foam. I just thought it worked here. To punch these holes out, the instructions literally say, cut them out with the scissors. I'm like, I don't think so. So I've got a leather punch here. And the thing about this is, especially with the EVA foam, so I've got, before I punch this out, I've got lined up, I measured it all out. Just put a ruler down, kind of lined up the edges, did every inch, and then on these corners are a little bit closer in from an inch, like 7/8, just so that they would have more material to bite on. But for these holes, this multi-size leather punch is where to go. I dot it out with a Sharpie, give it a squeeze so it clicks. Now because of this EVA, what I've been doing is I go back around to the other side and line it up, give it another click, and that way it punches right out. What the added benefit is now that I have a lot of little itty bitty EVA dot eyeballs because I got the Sharpie dot in the middle. So I'm going to punch the, let's see, next 15 of these out. Then put on the next 31. Let's see. No, the next 31 holes. There's 8 per side. 8 times 4 is 32. I've already done one. Okay, 31. Math with Fred. All right, so I've got my grommets in place. Looking good. Now I'm gonna got this elastic band, like I said before. There's quite a bit of it. I don't remember why I bought this originally, but I'm gonna use this as lace. And I think what I'm gonna do is a ladder lacing. It's a little kind of old-fashioned, so it'll look like just bars going across as opposed to like a crisscross, like nowadays when we tie our shoes. And all you do is you pass it like between the holes on the way back and forth. So what we're going to learn first is actually how to do the ladder. I keep wanting to do this backwards. No, that's how I do it. So the end part will end up going underneath because our ladder will be over the top. And that'll just make it look neater. And so to do that, every time you go between, instead of crossing over, you just go through here. And I'm going to want a lot of lead on this because these things are smooth but not super smooth. So when you go underneath, the next one you go around and down. And you just repeat that pattern all the way through. So what ends up happening is that you get these nice, whoops, wrong end. You get this nice straight lines going across, and you don't, that's all you see. You see, yeah. And that's all you see. You just see those straight lines. Which looks, like I said, a little neat, a little clean. And I just think that it'll suit the aesthetic I'm looking for here. And then once again, back behind between the two next to each other and over. So let me get the rest of this one done. We'll get to the end. I should be able to tie it off, and then I can kind of size it to my arm, cut off excess and just tie it off. Probably the same way. So what'll happen is on the front and the back, there'll actually be a whole loop, which will be fine. It's not that big of a deal. I could tie it off, just like do the tie off here at the corner. I could fold it under and glue it down so there's nothing visible. I want it more sturdy than that. Glue should be fine. In fact, if I did glue it down, what I would do is I would glue it down here, and then I would cut a piece of fabric and glue that on top of it, using some sort of contact like barge the weld wood I have, just because that would just kind of keep it in place more, have more contacts, because it's a very thin thing for gluing. But I think I'm just going to tie it off and leave a loop on both sides. It'll be fine. So let me get to that part. So I've got this right here. I could slip my arm in with this jacket And you can see it's way too loose. And so the proper way to tighten this up, and what I'll actually end up doing is double checking before I tie off the other end and cut it, is you keep it on where you want, because I'll need to put on my actual, I point it this way, my actual coat. And just like with a regular shoelace, you just kind of work it way down. The one thing about the ladder lacing is, you may notice, it's actually quite easy to do one-handed, which is going to prove helpful if you're doing this on your own hand. So that's a pretty good thing. It's a pretty good fit right now. It's still a little loose, but I want to make sure I can get my hand in and out of it too. So there's still a lot of stretch in that. So I'll probably end up tightening it off just a little bit more, and then I'll go ahead and tie off the end with another surgeon's knot, and we'll be done. And I'll do the other one. And then the last part after these two bracers are done is my leg wraps, and then we'll finally be done with this costume. It's been a long time going, but I'm looking forward to it. And here we have it. My steampunk miner for Antigone, set in 1920s West Virginia. I love my director. So we have all the elements in place. This helmet weighs more than I remember it weighing, but it turns on. Here, did it work? Hey, it worked. That's how I can tell if it's on or not. I've got all the accoutrement in place. I've got my bracers, I've got my gaiters, I've got things that don't end in ERS. I've got my little canary in a cage, because it's always safe to carry a canary when you go down to the mines. They die first. Got my mask, my helmet, of course, with its little things, my nice shirt, collar popped because, you know, cool elder statesman. It is Antigone, after all. I'm one of the chorus members. I think it works well. It's fairly comfortable. It's a little weird that my shirt's only tied into the front side of my pants. And also my gaiters aren't very contrasting in color, but that's okay. I think it still works. So there you have it. How I went from about $25 worth of Goodwill purchases and another $20 worth of craft store purchases into a complete outfit ready not only for my show, but also for next Halloween. I love being prepared. It's barely November right now. So I know this is not a typical video for my channel. I do have more crafting videos coming out, but usually it is going to be Minecraft or other video games. So whatever you like, watch what you will. Don't watch what you don't want to. I don't care. I just put it out there because I think it's fun. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. I'll catch y'all later.